4 days into training camp and 2 preseason games in the books. We'll share one word to describe what we've seen so far and tell you where Nashville has some work to do on today's Locked On Predators podcast.
You're Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Predators podcast, and thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are your free daily Nashville Predators podcast. We're a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Want to welcome any first-time listeners, our everydayers, and of course, a shout out to our Locked On Predators insiders on this Monday morning. We appreciate your support. We love that we get to kick off your week with you. I'm Ann Kimmel. I'm a writer with Penalty Box Radio, and my friends, I have a partner in crime.
You do. I'm Emma Lingen, and I'm the Predators site editor and reporter for the Hockey News.
On today's show, well, we're going to talk about it. We've had a little sneak peek at the 2024-25 Nashville Predators team after 3 days at training camp, 2 preseason games. We're going to tell you what we've seen so far that has impressed us, and we're also just going to touch on some areas in which we really need to see a little bit more. Before we dive into all of that discussion, do want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, Emma, it has been a busy week for the Nashville Predators. It has been a busy last week for you and I, let's be honest. Before we recorded, we were both like, I'm so exhausted. Why am I so tired?
We had to get all our yawns out before we started recording.
It was a whole thing. I'm telling you, watching this team practice at the pace with which they practice is exhausting.
It is, but also, Anne, I have to give you some extra bonus points because you by far have had the longer commute than I have, getting out to Fordyce, Bellevue multiple times this week. And as nice as the facility is out there, like really great facility, especially when you have to spend long hours there, I think we're both like kind of looking forward to when camp eventually moves to Centennial because it's a little easier to get to.
It is so much easier to get to. I will say this. I have been very thankful for some Broadway cast albums that have made the ride a little bit easier. And as much as I grumble about Centennial being so much colder than Bellevue, uncomfortably cold, friends, I'm ready to layer up and not drive so far. But yeah, it's been a week. And quite frankly, we haven't had skates on. So imagine how tired the Nashville Predators are because, again, and we talked about this on Friday's episode, Andrew Brunette hits the ground running. Like when it is day one of practice, he is not ready for you to ramp it up. You better be ready to go. And of course, yesterday afternoon, we kicked off the preseason games. The team flew to Florida. They had a game in the afternoon, a game in the evening, which gave us a look at a lot of the players on the training camp roster. Game 1 against Florida, Predators lost 3-2. Florida was up 3-0 at one point. Nashville clawed their way back in, got goals from Cole Smith and Joachim Kimmel. Game 2, Nashville also lost 6-2, friends. That's a half a dozen to do. But they did get goals from Jake Lucchini, and let's hear it for the first goal from Steven Stamkos, y'all. Yes, it was his first goal in gold, power play goal in the third period. The other thing that I loved about that second game, Emma, and this is just the mom in me, how about Cal and Ryan O'Reilly on the same line? Here for that.
There were 2 sets of brothers in that game. It was the O'Reillys and then the Boakfist brothers for Florida on the other side. So that was pretty cool to see. But it was the score was a little lopsided. I will say, not an excuse, and I know that the guys would never want to use this as an excuse. At one point during this game, the second game, I did kind of look at who was on the ice, and it was like all of Florida's starting, like all of their starters from their Stanley Cup roster against the Milwaukee Admirals at one point during that second game. And it was like, okay, like maybe not like the best measuring stick. Again, like not an excuse or anything like that. They also had Bobrovsky in net for the first half of the game. So like, again, not an excuse. But I just think that, you know, I encourage people not to get too spun up about like final scores in preseason games.
Absolutely. Yeah. These are preseason games, like I say about feelings, are like farts. They are indicators of something, but they don't necessarily always tell you the truth. So let's kind of look at these preseason games through that lens, especially these early ones, because you don't have some of the lines that are typically going to be together. So we've looked at sort of this sum total of what we have seen, Emma, from, you know, training camp this past week, from these games on Sunday. So what is one word to describe this preseason? And we're going to just say this is way too early, but we're doing it anyway. So what is one word to describe this preseason for you so far?
I'm gonna have to go with intense, and it's for the reasoning that you kind of just touched on with training camp with Andrew Brunette. Like, we've heard it from the returning players, we've heard it from the new players. I think Steven Stamkos was the one who said, this does not feel like, we talked to him on day one of camp. He goes, this does not feel like day one. Like, it, you know, you're not coming in kind of shaking off the dust. Like, you are coming in and you're expected to be ready to go, and you are expected to be at mid-season form right away. And you see that, and you know, it's kind of become a running joke of how much skating there is in Andrew Brunette's practices and how, you know, fast paced it is. And I think you know, even talking to Scott Wedgwood the other day at camp, he was talking about like, yeah, I don't think I've ever reviewed film as part of a training camp before. It's usually like after games we do that, but he's in there reviewing film from camp. And, you know, they're very serious. They're taking this very seriously. And it definitely shows in the way that, you know, preseason and camp has gone so far.
Yeah, I agree with you. It has been extremely intense. Maybe not as shocking for those of us who covered it last year, because last year it was like, what is he doing to these players? Does he hate everyone already? But now you just look, this is how Andrew Brunette runs it. And it starts from minute one of training camp on. So it's maybe not as shocking. The other reason why I think it's so intense is that you have these new players, but you also have just a couple of spots open, and there is some really good competition brewing in training camp for players who either want to make the NHL roster, or who want this organization to know, you need to call me up real quick. And so it's been very intense. The competition has been intense. The scrimmages have been intense. Along with that intensity, my one word is chemistry. And I know that we may not have seen it in those postseason or the preseason games yesterday in Florida, this chemistry, but also you have to remember that a lot of the lines that we have seen in training camp weren't together in those preseason games. You know, a lot of the players didn't play. But I will say, I have been shocked. I mean, truly shocked by the chemistry that we have seen and the consistency that we've seen from lines in training camp so far. Now, could that change? Yes, it could. But what we have seen from potential lines is kind of consistently playing together and playing very well together. And we're talking about Marchessault, Novac, Stamkos. We're talking about Evangelista, Sissons, Thomasino. We're talking about Cole Smith, Michael McCarron, Zachary Leroux. And honestly, the thing that is so delightful to me is that Ryan O'Reilly, Philip Forsberg, Gus Nyquist line looks like they have been picnicking all summer together, just not missing a beat. And so I think the chemistry has been good. You know, and part of that, I think, is just the vibes are good. I think people are very excited about the offseason moves and getting those new players up to speed. But I'm impressed initially with the chemistry we're seeing with some of these players. And, I thought maybe it would be more of a struggle. And I almost hate to put it out there because now it's going to be a struggle. But
now you jinxed it.
I know I jinxed it. Now I just said the thing.
No, but I think that, and to your point about how a lot of the lines that we've seen, again, it's only been a few days, but the lines that we've seen consistently in camp and then maybe didn't see them in the games, partly because, like you said, some players didn't play, but also because after these first 2 games is when we're going to start seeing roster cuts. And so you got to get guys, all the guys who are going back to juniors, like your Tanner Molendykes, your Kalen Linds, your, all of those guys, you got to get them some chances. You got to get them some touches before they are ultimately, cut from the roster and sent back to juniors. So that's part of it too. It's like these guys, a lot of these guys that were playing in the first 2 games against Florida are not necessarily going to be part of the equation for the Predators this season. But you still, you like to see them. I mean, this is a great opportunity to see them against NHL competition and see how they do, and just see, like, kind of as a measuring stick, like, where are we? How close are we here? And so I think it's a good development tool. It's a good evaluation tool, but to your point, that's not necessarily like the lines I would be paying closer attention to would be the ones that you see in practice and not the ones in the games.
Right. Yeah. And friends, those lines have looked really, really good. So we're going to see if that chemistry continues. The Predators will have another preseason game at the end of this week in Tampa Bay. Let's just get the emotional junk out of the way in the preseason, y'all. We're going to, of course, talk about the preseason games later on in this week. Coming up, there are plenty of areas where we feel like the Predators may need to focus a little bit more time in training camp, getting a little better at before they head down to Tampa for Friday's game. Coming up, we're going to tell you about those spots. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at PrizePicks. If you are looking for a fun way to enjoy all the sports action that happens in the fall, check out PrizePicks. It's America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. PrizePicks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. All you have to do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. PrizePicks is running a great September deal. For every one Caleb Williams passing yard, you get 1 win on PrizePicks every week this month. That's right. 1 yard gets you an automatic win every football weekend in September. PrizePicks invented the flex play too, which means that you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. Add some fun to your sports experience. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONNHL on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive that $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks. Run your game. Today's episode is also brought to you by Indeed. Just like your favorite sports teams, we are all driven by the search for better. But when it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. Indeed is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree. Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. Leveraging over 140 million qualifications and preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and let them know you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Again, that's Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. Okay, Emma, we are feeling pretty optimistic, I think, about what we have seen in training camp, what we've seen from the new players, what we have seen from some of the younger players. But let's talk about what we like to call opportunities for growth, areas for improvement. And, it is early. And I think these are all things that we don't need to weep and gnash our teeth over. But let's just talk about some things where Nashville probably needs to spend a little bit more time in training camp focusing on. Do you want to kick us off with one of those?
Well, I'm going to go with, again, with the caveat that a lot of these individual players are not the same players that we're going to be seeing, for Nashville on opening night. Something that was maybe could use some improvement would be the penalty kill, as we saw against Florida in those first two games, particularly the second game. Lot of penalties,
Yes.
which that in itself, another issue that we should probably address. But yeah, penalty kill wasn't great. It seemed like that's how you end up with a final score of 6-2. It was like every power play for Florida was a guaranteed goal. Again, a lot of factors at play there. But it just seemed like Nashville was struggling to get possession of the puck, even at 5-on-5. So then by the time that you get to, by the time that Florida has the man advantage, then it was just like, it was, like I said, just automatic goal for Florida on the power play. And it was like they could never quite get set up in the penalty kill. They could never quite kind of click the way that you would want a unit to. Now, again, not the end of the world. We've talked about this. One thing that Barry Trotz and as a result, Andrew Brunette has emphasized is, wanting to get some continuity on those special teams units. And so that's preseason is not great for that because you are going to be trying a bunch of different combinations, bunch of different guys in different roles. And so you're not, like I said, you're not really going to get a clear picture of that just from one or two preseason games. But I think that, if anything, though, to spin this in a positive way, that shows you the importance of having continuity in those units because we see what happens when you don't. It's not good.
Yeah, and it also makes it look worse when you are playing Florida. And I know that Florida had some other players in their lineup as well. But Florida finished 8th last regular season on the power play. Sam Reinhart was hatching power play goals like they were eggs and he was a chicken. He had 27 power play goals. That's just power play goals, y'all, last regular season. So you take something that doesn't really have like form or consistency to it, and then you put that up against Florida, who really is an amazing power play team, and it just sort of makes it look bigger. This would be much more concerning and will be much more concerning if we're having the same conversation in the last preseason game where the roster has shrunk, you've gotten your power play unit together, and if they are still giving up power play goals like this, then this is a problem. But again, yesterday, no Brady Shea, who really has been brought in not just defensively at 5-on-5, but for that penalty kill role. No Alexander Carrier, no Michael McCarron, no Cole Smith. They all played in the first game. So you didn't have your group.
We also saw Luke Evangelista get some time on the penalty kill. So that should tell you something.
That should give you a picture.
That should tell you all you need to know. Love Luke Evangelista. He is so good at so many things. Killing penalties, not one of them.
No.
And that's not the role you want him to play, So that should tell you. So I will say grain of salt, but penalty kill let's give some extra love and attention to that.
Yeah, let's spend some time with the units in practice coming up in the next couple of weeks for sure. And you have a great point. When you are Andrew Brunette and you want to play this fast system, you cannot have that interrupted as much as it was in these preseason games with penalties and the power play. And the penalties, y'all, it's going to be my next tattoo if the Predators win the Stanley Cup. There are no snacks in the sin bin. Stop going there. There's nothing there for you. There's nothing. There's like maybe water and warm Gatorade. There's nothing there for you. So please stop it. But for me, the other thing, and it kind of goes along the same lines, we're talking about the units being together. The power play, I don't think we saw the best in the first game in Florida yesterday when it came to an opportunity on the power play. We did get to see Steven Stamkos score a goal in the second game. And the one thing I will give a shout out for when it comes to that is I feel like Luke Evangelista, Tommy Novac, they were looking for those openings to get the puck to Stamkos. But again, you didn't have your top power play unit out there. And Nashville's power play unit on paper, or as Barry Trotz likes to say in fantasy hockey, is really going to be outstanding. We just didn't see it. But special teams need to be very good for Nashville in the regular season. Bottom line, they have to be very, very good.
Yeah, a lot of these off-season moves, you mentioned Brady Shea and Steven Stamkos in particular. Marchessault, maybe not the most prolific power play scorer, but he's certainly going to, should be a boost on that unit. I think that a lot of these moves were made with special teams in mind specifically. So I would say that's going to be the biggest litmus test, the biggest kind of measure of how good were these offseason signings. It's like, well, we got to see what they do on special teams, because that's where they can really have the biggest impact.
Right. I would also say you just want to see more connection offensively from the teams. And again, it's so strange, Emma, because I feel like in training camp, we really saw some good connection building between these lines. And then you go to this preseason game and you sort of mix up that roster and you don't see it maybe quite as much, but it's something to be watching for. I think you get more of a sense of that in training camp as it goes on and in later preseason games. But these are things that the Predators really need to spend some time working on in training camp so that when regular season kicks off, these things have to be really firing on all cylinders. Coming up, we, have talked about some things that the Predators need to improve upon. We're going to tell you a player that we are watching and liking what we see, and we're going to share with you a player we are waiting on to impress us. Okay, friends, it may not have been the best start to the season for the Tennessee Titans, but NFL fans, don't panic. You can still start your season with a big return at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game in one of these games, it's going to be the good kind of hunch. You can go and check out the latest stats. You can view live play-by-play and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You're going to get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet at FanDuel. So check out all of the action and fun available at FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. A couple little pieces of news that Emma and I want to drop into the podcast so everybody's up to date on. Just if you were looking yesterday for Reed Schaefer in these preseason games, he was injured in the rookie showcase. We have not seen him on the ice at training camp. Upper body injury, not on the ice at training camp, did not play in the preseason games. The other one, and this one causes me angst, Emma, it does. Fedor Svechkov went down in game 1 yesterday in Florida, looked like a lower body injury. Do I think we would have seen Reed Schaefer and Fedor Svechkov on the opening night roster in Nashville? Probably no. But those are two players that in Milwaukee, they are counting on to really take big steps forward to become kind of offensive and defensive leaders on this team. Fedor Svechkov played 57 games last season, 16 goals, 39 points. He was very good in the postseason, 6 goals and 12 points in their 15 games. So those are kind of two big losses. We'll kind of keep you up to date as if we hear any more on their status. The NHL keeps that stuff kind of close to the vest. The other news, and quite frankly, if Emma and my lives crash and burn, if we just end up in dark, dark places, it's because our life coach has taken a job somewhere else. Kevin
out
Lankinen.
of the country.
I mean, not even where we can do convenient visits.
No.
Kevin Lankinen has signed with the Vancouver Canucks.
He has. But you know what? Far be it for me to be the optimistic one out of the two of us, but I am just thinking, I don't know what's happening here. It's like an out of body experience, but I think that, again, if we can't have him here in Nashville, because we know we love Kevin Lankinen.
Love Kevin Lankinen.
I think we want the best for him and what is going to be a good opportunity for him. Now, understand he signed for under 900K. That was absolutely not what he was going to be looking for. He's making literally less than half of what he made to back up UC Saros last year.
I'm offended on his behalf, but go on.
As am I. However, I think this is an opportunity for him because he is, signing technically as a backup, but with Vancouver, with their situation, with their goaltending, Thatcher Demko is still injured. We don't really know what the deal is there. They got rid of DeSmith. They need a guy, and Kevin Lankinen now has the opportunity to come in and be that guy. And I think that, again, the money, how long it took, all of that, none of it is ideal. None of it is what he would have wanted. But I think that it is a good opportunity for him. And he gets to be reunited with one of our other favorites here on the podcast, Kiefer Sherwood, who also, I think, has a good opportunity with Vancouver now, with the news about, obviously very unfortunate news about Dakota Joshua, who has, who's going to be out for the start of the season while he recovers from successful surgery. So we're happy about that, to remove testicular cancer. But I think that Kiefer Sherwood, very similar type of player to Dakota Joshua. I think that is going to be an opportunity for him to kind of elevate himself, be in a bigger role there, and maybe get some more minutes, get maybe some more top six time even, because it's, he kind of fills that gap very well. So I think it's good chances, good opportunities for both of these guys. Of course, we wish we could have them here. I was even just talking to someone from the Predators hockey operations staff the other day at training camp, and he said, I really miss Woody. And it was like, me too, man. Me too. We love Woody. We love Lanky, and we truly want the best for them.
Yeah. And I do think great opportunities with where Vancouver is for both of them to be important contributors to them. Kind of sucks for Nashville because they're in the Western Conference, but we don't have to see it a lot. It's not like they're going to rub it in our face. But yeah, good gets for Vancouver and good opportunities for Kiefer Sherwood and our future life coach, Kevin Lankinen. I guess we need to talk about the players that are here and not just mourn the ones that are lost, even though we do, because that's just who we are as people. Emma, as you look at, what we saw last week at training camp, what we saw yesterday in the preseason games, give me a player that you are really enjoying watching, and give me a player that you are waiting on to see take a next step.
I'm going to say this is one that I think a lot of us kind of went into training camp, went into the preseason, kind of holding our breath to be like, okay, like, what are you going to do? And thankfully, I am now breathing a sigh of relief because Tommy Novac looks really good.
Doesn't
He looks good. It's funny because I've had some people ask me, like, can you tell, has he put on some weight, some muscle? Hard to tell because I've really only seen him either in sweats or in pads, and that's, doesn't really give you a good idea. But I think it's less about that. Like, listen, of course you don't want him to go out and get ragdolled like he did against Vancouver in the playoffs, but he's also not, that's not his game, is to be like the big, like, heavy checking guy. Like, he's the skill guy. He's going to distribute the puck. That's what you want him to do. And like Steven Stamkos said, he's slippery. Andrew Brunette said he's like Gumby. He just weaves in and out, and he manages to just get out of the way. It's just the right time. And, I think that, yeah, of course, it's not going to hurt if he beefs up a little bit, but that's not, you don't want him to completely change the type of player he is. And, you talked at the beginning of the show about how we've seen some consistency in these lines, at least in camp. And one of them has been Tommy Novac centering the line with Steven Stamkos and Jonathan Marchessault. And at first I was like, I don't know how this is going to go. And I got to say, it has looked really, really good. You get a guy like Tommy Novac, who is a skilled passer. I think Jonathan Marchessault said he has the potential to be an elite passer in this game. And that's not an exaggeration. You get a player like that with two shooters in Stamkos and Marchessault. They really like to shoot the puck. They both ranked, I think, within the top 30 in the league last year in shots on goal. So you get a guy like that with two guys who like to shoot it. I mean, just sit back and enjoy the show.
Pretty.
Yeah.
And he has looked fantastic with them. He does not look there's been no moments that are glaring like, wow, Tommy Novac is just a step behind. And they have emphasized, Brunette has emphasized, they think the game at the same level. They think the game at the same level. And it has been great to watch. Who is somebody that you're like, hey, any minute now, show me what you got?
Juuso Parssinen. Where are you, buddy?
Yes, I know.
You know what? I'm also a big fan of Philip Thomasino, but I'm going to be honest with you. Coming into camp, I would have expected kind of the opposite trajectory for these two players.
Same.
Thomasino has looked very good. And it's not that I thought he was going to look bad. It was more just like, to me, I didn't know like if he would really be playing, in these, I say big minutes with air quotes because they're inter-squad scrimmages, how much are you really going to see? But I think that he's been getting a lot of these consistent reps on the line with Colton Sissons and Luke Evangelista. That has, that line seems to have some good chemistry. Parssinen has kind of just been popping in and out of the lineup in different places, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It just means you're trying to get a feel of where he fits, but he hasn't quite stood out in training camp to me to where, if I was maybe new to the team or if I didn't know anything about these players, if I were just trying to be objective, like who stands out to me, he has been kind of quiet, and I would like to see more from him.
That was exactly the same as me. And I'm with you 100% on the Thomasino Parssinen thing. This is not how I saw it going, but you notice Phil Thomasino, you see an elevated level of play from him. And Bruno talked about there is a mindset element of that. And Thomasino kind of said the same thing himself. Juuso Parssinen has not looked bad. You just almost can overlook him so far in training camp. So let's see if maybe he gets some opportunities and does some more with it. For me, player that I'm really liking to watch, and I know we sound like a broken record here, but especially after the preseason game, Mark Del Gaizo. And I know we sound like a broken record, and I'm sorry, we're just consistently right.
I'm honestly glad you said that because I was going back and forth between him and Tommy Novac. But I mean, he's looked good. He's looked very, very good.
So good and so calm and just ready. He just seems ready for, what are you going to throw at me? What do you need me to handle? What situation do you need me to get us out of? How do you need me to do this? And I felt like he looked very good in the preseason game, like calm, mature, on top of the game, not playing behind, not thinking too hard, but just even in practice. And I know we've joked about he's fun size and, he's not that giant physical defenseman that, the Predators were talking a lot about after that Vancouver series. But man, Mark Del Gaizo has done exactly and a little more than what you would hope to see from somebody who is so freaking ready. So freaking ready.
Yeah, and there's the added twist here of Spencer Stastny not being at training camp, and we still don't know, personal reasons. We don't know anything beyond that. We don't know the length of time he's expected to be out. But what I can say is that regardless of the circumstances, I think any player who misses the majority of training camp at this point, especially one in his position where he was kind of a bubble guy to begin with, it's hard to see a guy like that making the opening night roster when you have missed most of training camp. Or even if you make the roster, it's hard to see you being an everyday starter who's getting a ton of opportunities, just because and I don't mean that as like a punishment. It's more of
No.
like you're not up to
Logistics,
speed
up to speed. Mhm.
and that's not good for anyone. That's not putting anyone in a good position. So I think that with that added wrinkle, it opens up even, more opportunity for someone like Mark Del Gaizo, potentially to kind of take that spot. And like I said before, I genuinely believe of the players who finished the year on Milwaukee's roster last season, he is the only one to me who I would feel comfortable saying, yep, put him in the NHL right now.
Yeah. And I think he has done everything at training camp and done things in, his first preseason game to show the team I'm ready. So for me, it's been great to watch. It's what I expected, but also I would say a little bit more. Like, this is somebody who has continued to improve his game. So for me, delighted to see what Mark Del Gaizo is bringing to training camp. Plenty more work to be done in this preseason. Of course, the Predators continue with training camp this week. They have today off. They'll be back at Ford Ice Center, Bellevue on Tuesday and Thursday for practices. Those are open to the public. Wednesday night, they are having the Gold Star Showcase? Am I right?
Yep.
That's what it's called, in Clarksville. Get you some more information about that on the Nashville Predators website as well. And then, like we said, the end of this week, big preseason back-to-back against the Tampa Bay Lightning. We're going to get all our feels out ahead of the regular season, y'all. That's right. That's what he looks like in gold. He's ours. You can't have him back. Everybody move along. So a lot going on this week with the Nashville Predators. And of course, Emma and I will be here to cover all of that for you as well. Before we sign off on the podcast, Emma, let everyone know where they can find you and your work.
Can find me on social media at Emma_Lingen, and you can find my work at the Hockey News.
And you can find my work at Penalty Box Radio. You can find me on social media at AnnK_Mama on Ice. That's going to do it for this Monday episode of the Locked On Predators podcast. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We will be back tomorrow with an all new episode. We'll see you then.